Hey guys, it's Seanbot back with our 1000 subscribers special video. Actually, this is my second attempt because I accidentally deleted my original voiceover. It's only been a year since I started this series, both as a hobby in content creating and to give back to the community that I've been part of for 10 years. It's all thanks to you guys that I was able to do this. Biggest shout out to my thumbnail editor Scoople for creating the awesome thumbnails for my videos. My project here would not have been possible without him. The fact that I've hit 1000 subscribers makes me feel like I've reached my goal of creating content that other people love watching, which motivates me even more to make more fun content to share with you guys. Anyways, this is a super special guide on how to make Mesos, a fitting video for my aim in trying to help new players. I don't generally make guides unless it's a never been seen before type of content, but I decided to make a Meso mega guide for my 1k sub special. This took the most preparation out of any video I've made, especially because I've had to redo this again, but I think you guys deserve it for all the support you've shown to my series and my channel, so please keep doing so. If you already haven't done so, or if this is your first video from my channel, please consider subscribing to follow my free-to-play progression series and to watch similar informative videos to this. The format for this video is very different to normal. Even before diving in, I could say for sure this has been my longest video up to now, so I apologize in advance, but I added timestamps to this video, so watch the sections that interest you the most, and of course you can rewatch this as many times as you want. Also, in the video description, I have the script to this whole video, so if you're a visual learner, there it is. Hopefully people don't bother me about Mesos for a long time. For me, making Mesos has always been my personal hobby in this game over the years I've played, and I'd say this is about 95% of the reason I've been able to play for so long. How do I make Mesos? This is something I've personally found myself googling every month or so throughout my time playing this game, and I'm hoping to answer that question in this video and teach you everything I know about making Mesos. Unfortunately, this only applies to regular servers as Reboot does not have an open market to buy or sell from other players, but for players in other regions this video could also be very useful. I'm going to be talking about a lot of different Meso strats. Even if they're not currently viable in Bera at the moment, maybe the market condition in your region actually favors those. I'm going to split this guide into three main sections. A section on the idea of Mesos and markets, a section on my stories on how I made billions in the past, and finally the juicy part, the current market and showing all the possible ways I can think about to make Mesos. No secrets in this video, let's begin. Let's talk a bit about economic theory here. Maplestory market is a somewhat prototype of a regular market, so whatever applies to the real market applies to the Maplestory market in theory. I actually wrote a mathematics paper on price determinants in the stock market, so it's funny how my research complements my Maplestory market knowledge here. Anyways, in economics, the most basic concept to talk about is supply and demand, which essentially creates a price in an economy. All items have their own individual supply and demand. For example, primal essence, which is used to craft Meso rings and dominator pendants, have a very low supply, only through extremely rare Ikarim drops or mysterious veins, and extremely high demand because they're able to craft endgame equips. On the other hand, items like Zakum helmets have extremely high supply as it drops every Zakum run and is basically the easiest boss in the game, but extremely low demand because it's complete garbage. Supply and demand for a specific item only changes with different market conditions such as events, so one can theoretically advantage off this by merging through different events. For example, you'd want to buy arcane equips during Marvel because there's a larger increase in the supply side, but sell it later when there's a 5, 10, 15 event coming up because there's generally a larger demand. It wouldn't make sense selling arcane equips during Marvel unless you were really desperate for Mesos quickly, so it's important figuring out which event is appropriate for what action, buy or sell. This is making Mesos literally off changing market conditions, and is super profitable. The best thing of all is that it's very basic. It just requires you to know the various important types of event in this game and be patient. The important ones that I can think of is 5, 10, 15, DMT, Spelltrace Fever, 30% of Star Force, Marvel, Philosopher's Book, Wonderberry, and Maplehood. I probably missed a few, but maybe spend some time thinking about the market conditions for a few items in these events, and bam, you already have a way to make Mesos long term. Next, I want to talk about market types. It's important to identify which market your equip is in because that will determine how much of them there are in the market. There's only two I want to talk about here, perfectly competitive markets and oligopolies, and this kind of refers to how fair the market is. Perfectly competitive markets are basically the most open markets where anyone can buy and sell these items. For example, cubic blades, cubic chaos blades, flames are all part of the perfectly competitive markets. There's a super large supply of them and as much of a demand for them, so nobody can hoard tons of these and force high prices because there's way too many in the market. Generally, the items in this market are what we call liquid, which means there are a lot of transactions for these items every day. Oligopolies are basically economies where there are only a few people on the supply side selling them, so for example frenzy totems. From the way I see it, there are two types of oligopolies in this game. Oligopolies from pay to win items like frenzy totems, fire starter rings, and other very rare pay to win items, and oligopolies created by creativity, like the Swift Break market that I created in my series. Generally, the pay to win oligopoly is very liquid, and the creative oligopoly is not so liquid as there are only a very specific group of buyers. If you were to ask me which market is the most profitable, I would definitely say oligopolies. that is, the unknown and unexplored markets. Throughout my series already, I've been focusing on oligopoly structured markets like the Swift Rake and the Familiar Market, very niche markets that have high returns. Let me also talk about something I see very common, undercutting. There's a common misconception among new players to always undercut. Nope, I don't think so. There should be a lot of different factors to gauge when undercutting. Some examples are price expectation, how you expect prices to move in the future, and liquidity, how well will it sell. If your item here is something that sells very slowly, sure, undercutting might not be a bad idea, but if your item is very liquid, undercutting is usually not too great because your item will sell immediately and prices will stabilize higher again. The other big determining factor should be investment horizon. This is how long you expect to hold something before you sell it. And ideally, you want to align when you need Mesos with when you sell your investment. For example, if you see a really cheap item in the auction house right now and you only need a bit more Mesos to buy it, selling something right now for cheaper than normal is a good idea to take advantage of that. But my point here is that there is a time for different circumstances, so don't immediately rush to undercut someone. In this game, everyone is an investor. Even if you're not currently participating in the market, but you're picking up items, you're holding items that have value that can be converted to Mesos later, which is the definition of an investor, so think like one. To provide an example of how I interact with the market, let's analyze how I list up my Junipers in the auction house. I rarely ever undercut Junipers. The stable market price is generally 800 to 900k, but I always list them up for 900k, sometimes 1 mil in fact. The biggest reason for this is because I know people need Junipers for wealth and EXP potions, which is demanded by everyone who farms in this game. Therefore, Junipers are in fact very liquid. Another big reason why I can afford to list such high prices is because there isn't enough constant supply in the market to meet the demands. Sure, from time to time, people might dump 9,000 Junipers at 700k each, but that will sell out within a week, and prices will stabilize back to 800 to 900k. That's just the nature of liquid investments. The only drawback with my strategy of listing above the market is that it can take anywhere between 1 day to 3 weeks to sell with my high price, depending on how market participants interact here. But unless I need the Mesos right now, I find it's always more beneficial to list higher for Junipers. In terms of profit difference, I'm making 200k more than if I undercutted, so listing for 700k instead of 900k. And over 1000 Junipers, that's a 200 mil difference in profitability. That's quite a big difference. So make sure you're aware of how you treat your investments to maximize your gains. Now that we're done talking about market theory, let's talk about what you can do with Mesos. Obviously, people use Mesos for funding, but I think there's a common misconception for most new players that damage equals Mesos. That is, the more damage they get, the more Mesos they will obtain. Yes and no. It definitely will help to have more damage, sure, but it doesn't mean that you will definitely have more Mesos than a weaker player. You need to know how more damage will translate to more Mesos, otherwise it's completely pointless getting damage. You're better off just putting the Mesos into reinvesting and getting more profit. You get much more returns if you put in more money because return is percentage based, not flat based. For example, an investor with 1 mil Mesos will not make the same returns as an investor with 10 bill Mesos. The investor with 10 bill Mesos has the flexibility to buy a lot more of the same items as the investor with 1 mil Mesos buys, but can also invest in more expensive items that have a higher return, which the investor with 1 mil Mesos can't afford. It's always a question of, should I put the money I earned into damage or should I reinvest this money back and make more profit? Unless you clearly know how you're going to make more Mesos with more damage, there's literally no point. You're just wasting time and being inefficient in your progression. So if you notice with my progression, I have a very clear goal of gearing up until I can solo easier weekly bosses on my Kana, then completely stop funding it because that's the point I believe is the most cost efficient to get to. The amount of Mesos to reach the next milestone bosses are simply not worth the investment in my opinion, so think ahead before you continue funding your character. If you can't answer, how can I make more Mesos with better damage, that simply means you're not thinking. You're better off just not doing anything with your Mesos. I don't believe bossing is as profitable as people think, and it's certainly not a necessary path to becoming rich. I believe there's so many other things you can do to make Mesos in this game. But I think I've said everything I wanted to in terms of ideas and theory, so let's move on to the next section. Now, time for some story time with my own personal experience. Progression in any MMORPG game is dictated by how much money do you want to spend versus how much time do you want to spend. For example, playing free-to-play means you will need to spend a lot more time relative to someone else who is not free-to-play to get to the same progression point. Personally, I would definitely choose to work in real life at like $25 an hour and spend money in this game instead of farming 60 mil an hour with regular Juniper farming, which is like 50 cents an hour. It's really up to you. Anyways, the common denominator with how I made Mesos back then was through events. Events affect the supply and demand in the market, and I really abuse that. Knowing when the time is right to buy or sell is never certain, but you slowly build intuition as you play longer. Flip merching, which is buying low and selling high instantly with pure bargaining power, was really never my strong point, so I avoided that path completely. Unfortunately, all of these are outdated methods now, as the meta has changed, but I think you'll be fun analyzing this anyways, and you guys can get a feel for the way I analyze opportunities, so let's get cracking. Unfortunately, I don't have any old recordings, so I'll have to improvise here. 2014 was a turning point in my Maplestory experience. I started in 2010, and like most people who start new games, I was a complete noob. I think I was actually a bit more noob than the average Maplestory player. I had no idea how to make Mesos and was only losing Mesos by the day. My only enjoyment at this point was buying gachapon tickets, not for profit but just for the fun of gambling, and also watching Maplestory YouTubers. I'll just name drop my favourite YouTubers here: Deboki, Smartboard, Sorrowful Memory, Toy Doula, Aussie Style 93, so on. I watched almost everyone back then, but those are the notable ones that come to mind right now. The only decent thing I did back then was to keep an eye on the KMS patch notes through Orange Mushroom, and even with my tiny pea brain back then, I figured out that whatever KMS gets, we get. Anyways, KMS had a Cygnus update in 2013 where the Cygnus Knights were all completely revamped, and looking at the Nightwalker skills, I decided to ditch my current main as Xenon and main Nightwalkers when the revamp hit GMS. I randomly had the first intelligent thought I've ever had in this game. What happens to Balanced Furies, the best throwing stars in this game, when Nightwalkers get revamped? This doesn't seem like anything special now because almost everyone does that these days, but back then, anticipation of events was a very new concept. I farmed 100 Balanced Furies over a whole year through ITCG, and they were stable at about 150 mil during the entire year. When the Cygnus revamp hit GMS, they peaked at 500 mil per Fury. I made 35 bill in 1 week. That was insane for me. I never had so much fun just counting my Mesos in my inventory. All it took was a bit of thinking, and that made me realize how easy making Mesos was. The general consensus back then was that merching was the only way to make big bank, so this was the first experience to make me challenge that status quo and try become rich in unconventional ways. Oh, and by the way, I was in middle school back then, so if even I had enough brain cells to think like this, you guys should be able to do the same. With the Mesos I earned through Balanced Furies, I invested not in damage but in drop gear. I could easily have gone the damage route, but I was super motivated to make Mesos unconventionally, and I followed my instinct that this route was perfect for a player like myself, and boy was this the right decision. Dropkey wasn't meta by this point. I'd say most people only really started seeing the value of Dropkey in 2017 to 2018. I got my full Dropkey set done in 2015, so I was ahead of the rest. I got into the habit of looking at all the free market stores at least once a day back then to find what kind of items people wanted, and I found something life-changing. Junipers. It's funny that Junipers have probably been the most iconic thing in my series right now. My connection with Junipers started from 2015. Juniper berry oils were only 2 mil per oil back then, but what was even more striking was that EXP accumulation potions and wealth acquisition potions were 35 mil each back then. Bruh. It costed 20 mil to make 3 EXP accumulation potions, and that would sell for 105 mil. That's 85 mil profit for every 10 juniper berry seed oil. I abused the hell out of that. I don't remember how much profit I made specifically, and I have no record, but I wouldn't be surprised if it reached 100 bill just with this for 2 years before the market caught on. When there weren't any juniper berries in the market, I farmed juniper berry seeds from Evolution Lab with my drop gear. Unfortunately, we can't do this anymore. This was the most consistent profit I've ever found. From what I've observed over recent times, the market has really been correcting itself every year, and there are much less windows to arbitrage like I did in the past. But with new patches come new opportunities, so keep an eye on them and be the first to make profit off them. The market is never perfect. Remember when I made 1 bill off Familiars over 2 weeks in episode 15? That was a few months after the Familiar system got revamped, and even now I still see opportunities in that market. I'll try my best to alert you guys when I see a massive opportunity like the ones from my stories. But do keep in mind if I literally say in my video, so buy this for a 5 times return in 1 year, everyone's going to follow, so there might not even be profit. Oh, I just remembered, I also currently have an investment on my main account. I bought 1000 Epic Odor Warrior Familiars when they were 2 mil each, and they're currently 10 mil each in Bearer at the moment. If I were you, I would invest in that. Even with current prices, I'm 95% sure you will make a good return. I'm expecting they will peak at around 25 to 30 mil, because farmable Epic Familiars were a mistake from Nexon, so I don't think it's likely they will ever introduce easy to farm Epic Familiars again. The only other way to get Epic Familiars is to train rare Familiars to Epic and rank them up, but that is very, very tedious. So people will be forced to continue to buy Epic Familiars. So I propose that this is a very safe investment. The only drawback is that it will take at least a year for the Epic Familiars to go up in price at all, due to the sheer amount of people who farmed them back when this was a mistake. But from now on, I think it will only just keep going up. Alright, I think this is a part most of you want to see. So after talking extensively about market theory and my past ways of making Mesos, how do I view the market now? Well, there's one very, very notable thing in this current meta. The Mesos NX rate. What that suggests is that there aren't many bots in the server, which means clean slates, epic potential scrolls, cubic blades, cubic health blades, flames, etc. are also worth a lot. This also suggests that cash items such as drop coupons, EXP coupons, red cubes, black cubes, perm NX equips, etc. are also very cheap as well. Theoretically here, everyone should be buying drop coupons like it's water, so farmable items such as Nodestones and Arcane Droplets should be very cheap. Arcane Droplets are cheap, then Arcane Equips are also cheap, blah blah. I can go on this forever. Do you see the way I think? Just one piece of information about the meta makes me roughly mind map the state of the entire market. If the actual market is not reflective of my guess, either I have wrong information or there is an opportunity to profit somewhere. For example, Arcane Droplets are 10 million bearer at the moment. If they were actually 100 mil in the market, then I would do nothing but farm for them and make big profit off them. But back to the point, the fact that Meso's NX rate is so high means that Mesos is very valuable right now. This means that intense power crystals and dailies that give flat Mesos is a must do in the current meta, and Meso farming is very viable at the moment. I don't really see this meta as a merching meta. Although there is a potentially high return, it comes with high risk. Meso farming is no risk and high returns as well. You can literally farm 600 mil per hour in the regular server if you are farming in the most optimal conditions. That's 12k NX an hour if the current rate is 1 to 15, and I don't think merching comes close to that in terms of risk and reward. So flat Mesos is the way to go right now in my opinion. This also means you probably want to hold off Star Forcing for the moment because Mesos is so valuable. Work on cubing first and Star Force later when Mesos devalues. At least that's what I'm going to be doing for my progression in this series. Now let's go through the juicy part most of you have been waiting for. How do you make Mesos? It's funny that I've constantly been emphasizing creativity when I literally make a section in this video saying, follow this and become rich. I'm already assuming there will be a lot of people watching this video and following my tips in this section, so it probably won't be as profitable anymore after this video is released. The important thing I want to teach is how to think of opportunities and to profit off them. It's important that you find your progression point and find the most efficient way of making Mesos for yourself. Like, if you're at 60k stat, but the only consistent Meso making strategy you can rack your brain to do is Juniper farming with normal rakes, only yielding 60 mil an hour, then either A, you're a whale, or B, what the hell have you been doing this game? That's the rate people would expect completely new players to be making. Anyways, let's begin. First and foremost, dailies. Regardless of the game meta, if you want your wealth to accumulate, you need to be making Mesos consistently every day at the bare minimum. There's 3 dailies that I believe you should be doing every day before you do anything else, because they give a good chunk of flat Mesos. Ursus, daily bosses, and Maplestory. Perfect, just as I was getting to talk about this, Ursus and Maplestory got nerfed. The Meso numbers might not be the same anymore, but it's the same idea. Ursus is a daily boss where you team up with other Maplers through the quick start from the NPC Masa Ryu for Mesos and EXP rewards. You want to queue up 1 hour after the daily reset on the dot because that's when it's golden hour where you get double the Mesos. People don't really queue up at other times. The Meso reward scales based on your level, but if you're over level 200, you can expect a minimum of 6 to 7 mil if your party does clear. You can enter 3 times a day, so you get about 18 mil a day from this. Next is daily bosses. Daily bosses and weekly bosses for that matter drop special items called intense power crystals, which can be sold to the collector in the free market for Mesos. The Meso amount is determined by the difficulty of the boss. Here's a list of exactly how much Mesos you can get from which boss. But there's a catch here. There's a limit of 60 intense power crystals you can sell each week, resetting on the Wednesday to Thursday reset. So you have to figure out which crystals give you your own optimal Mesos. I get about 15 mil a day just doing this now, but at the start of my journey, I only got about 8 mil a day, so it really depends on what bosses you can do. Finally, Maplestory is basically a Monster Park dungeon with 6 stages and gives you 3 to 4 mil each run depending on your level after the recent patch, and you can do 2 runs a day. That's 6 to 8 mil a day, but it works in a wage system where you have to wait a week to receive your weekly amount. So my total daily Mesos is about 40 mil a day, which means that even if I did nothing at all other than those dailies, I'm still 40 mil richer than yesterday. And honestly, those 3 dailies above only takes me about 40 minutes in total, so it doesn't take that long to do. They also have some side benefits to do. You can get cubes from daily bosses, epic potentials and powerful flames from the Ursus shop, and piggy bank from Maplestory, although that recently got removed for us. I don't really see anything too good in the Maplestory shop other than that, so maybe it's not time efficient to do this anymore, but who knows. Next I might add something to the Maplestory shop to compensate for that. Now, these meta strategies should only be done after you do your dailies, but let's get down to analyzing them. I'll try to go in order of progression for your convenience, starting with things anyone can do to things people can only do in the later stages of the game. Of course, whenever there is anything to farm, investing in dropkey and popping a 2x cash drop coupon might be a good idea. I hope I don't even have to explain this with my series emphasizing this so much. Juniper berries are needed to make wealth acquisition potions and EXP accumulation potions, which are needed for both farmers and people wanting to level, so they're always high in demand. In Bearer, Junipers sell for 800 to 900k Mesos, so if you can farm them, you can make profit. There's 2 types of farming techniques here. You can go to the expert mine in Ardent Mill and harvest purple flowers to have a chance of getting a Juniper berry seed. You will need level 10 herb mining, otherwise you have a high chance of failing the harvest and getting nothing. But level 10 also doesn't guarantee that you will succeed all the time. If you don't know how to get to level 10 quickly, just buy the cheapest flower or berries from the auction house and craft the oils to level up your mastery. This will net you on average 60 Junipers over 200 fatigue, which takes about 50 minutes to max out, so about 50 mil after 50 minutes. You can improve on this rate by getting a Swift Rake or Light Rake from Orange Imps, which gives more than one seed at a time. You can get a max of 5 with Swift Rakes and 3 with Light Rakes, and Swift Rakes have an average of 180 Juniper Berry seeds after 200 fatigue, whereas Light Rakes give about 120 Juniper Berry seeds after 200 fatigue. These special rakes also farm faster than regular rakes, and it takes about 40 minutes to max out 200 fatigue. The only bad thing about this is that those special rakes follow a durability system, but you can't repair them once they break. Swift Rakes last around 500 harvests, and Light Rakes last 800 harvests, so Light Rakes are better in this regards. The other farming technique is to find gold flowers and mysterious flower veins, and hope that they will drop junipers. You can get a lot if you're lucky. Gold flowers actually drop juniper berry oils, so if you're lucky, you can get up to 5 juniper berry seed oils. The other advantage with this farming technique is that you can get some other nice things like cubes from those flowers, and you can hit the 1 in 10,000 chance that you get a primal essence, which sells for 400 mil in Berra. You can maximize these chances by picking up a golden shovel, also from Orange Imps, which gives an extra level to your harvesting, meaning that you have a higher chance of succeeding in your harvest. Personally, I would recommend farming in expert mining fields with Swift Rakes, because the Meso rate is quite consistent on average over time and not bad. 180 Juniper Berry seeds is about 160 mil per 40 minutes, which is an insane rate. Extrapolating that, that's 240 mil per hour, and that's as good as it gets until you reach later stages in this game with proper farming gear. Best of all, it's quite brainless, and no matter what your progression point is, this is something anyone can do. I usually just binge watch a show while farming, so super relaxing as well. This is something all players are very familiar with, but I don't see it being emphasized as much these days. Superior item crystals are needed to make almost anything for smiths, so they're very highly demanded. This isn't something to actively farm or anything, but more so a tip to disposing equips that you loot. When you get heaps of equips over level 130 from daily bosses and training, instead of NPCing or dropping them, extract them. You can extract 10 of them at a time if you're an alchemist or 5 at a time if you're a smith. Generally level 140 and above equips give up to 4 superior item crystals and philosopher's stones, which have a market price of 150k each in Berra, so that's potentially up to 600k you can get for each pencilier equipment piece. Isn't that amazing? A couple of years ago they sold for 1 mil each, and I think over time there were too many people who did this, so prices went down to 50k in Berra about a year ago. At 150k per pop, I think this is very worth doing, especially if you want to clear some space in your equipment inventory. Although the profession system was introduced in 2011, you'd be surprised at how many profitable opportunities there still are in the market. As I mentioned before, I abused the hell out of EXP and wealth potions until 2016, then everyone started to see that market, so it wasn't as profitable anymore. But there's still so many other abusable things in professions. I could probably even make a whole video on profession and the market arbitrage that exists, but I'm going to keep it short here and go through with you some valuation examples in each profession. This is probably the most underrated profession. I think everyone knows about EXP and wealth potions, so I'm going to skip that. Some other things to look into this profession are exceptional potions, normal and advanced boss rush, great hero, penetrating, great blessing potions, and legendary hero potions. Picking boss rush potions as an example, most people who boss pretty seriously would be well aware with these, but for the less experienced players, here we go. Boss rush potions add 10% boss damage and they last 40 minutes, so they're great for that extra DPS that you're missing in bossing. Let's go through some current market prices to find the value of these. First, let's look at the market price for boss rush potions. 5 mil. To make 2 boss rush potions, we need 1 superior empty bottle, 10 mana crystals, 10 Hyosops, 15 twisted time, and 3 dusk essence. I'm going to ignore the twisted time, mana crystal, and superior empty bottles because they're only a few Ks. Hyosops are currently 400k in this picture and Dusk Essences are 40k, so our total cost comes up to about 4.12 mil. We get 2 boss rush potions out of this and they have a market price of 5 mil each, so there's nearly a 6 mil profit here for every 10 Hyosops. Bruh, if someone decided to buy all 4,000 Hyosop oils there and craft boss rush potions to sell, that's 2.4 bill profit. If that isn't profit, I don't know what is. The first thing that comes to mind are Demon Shields for warriors and mages. They used to be the best in slot, but I'm not sure if they are anymore. There are also best in slot projectiles for Corsairs like me, Night Lords and Night Walkers in Giant Bullets and Infinite Throwing Knives. There are also magic whetstones which provide smithing mices with 5% crit damage buff for 40 minutes. Let's go through the valuation of Infinite Throwing Knives, which are by far the most wanted throwing knives because they're able to store 2,000 of them rather than the normal 1,000. And there's an insane opportunity here. Current market price is 300 mil. It's such a small but necessary market that people are able to demand this price. Unfortunately, you need the recipe for this and it was last sold for 200 mil. Already there's an opportunity here to profit off farming this recipe and selling. Anyways, the ingredients for this barely comes out to be a few mil, so there's more than 100 mil profit if we assume you can buy Infinite Throwing Knife recipes at 200 mil each. If I were you, I'd look to farm that recipe and make it for some easy profit, although I have heard the drop rate is quite horrible for that. Finally, there's Accessory Crafting. In Accessory Crafting, there are Meister Rings, Powerful and Eternal Flames. Unlike Master and Meister Cubes, these craftable flames are actually tradable, so there are opportunities to make profit here, but I don't see this very often. I'm going to calculate the profit from Meister Rings as our example here. Meister Rings sell for about 600 mil each, and the ingredient is 800 Twisted Time, 100 Mana Crystals, 35 Philosopher's Stone, 150 Grand Spell Essence, and 1 Primal Essence. The only really expensive thing here is a Primal Essence, which goes for 430 mil in Bera. The other ingredients come up to being about 10 mil, so you can expect about 150 mil profit here. So to conclude this part, crafting surprisingly has a lot of opportunities, so it's definitely worth looking out for these. Of course, whether you make profit or not depends on market condition. If there isn't anyone buying, then you're not making any profit. I only picked an example from each profession, but make sure to go through the other items to find more unique opportunities. Remember, creativity is a way to make mesos. Let's talk about familiars. Familiars are needed to unlock badges, which give more combat stats and can unlock more familiar slots. I have 3 ways to make profit here. This is something easy that I did in my series, which got me 1 bill over 2 weeks. Basically, in this method, you buy or farm 200 common familiars, extract them to 2000 familiar points, and buy a Roro's booster pack from the Roro shop and open it. It's a gambly way of making mesos, but on average there still is profit, although it's not as much as it used to be. I can't properly value the gains here because we don't know the probability of each specific familiar coming out, but if we look at the cost side, roughly each junk familiar is about 30k mesos in Bera at a good time. If you buy 200 of them, you're investing 6 mil, and since this pack produces 3 familiars, you need an average value of 2 mil from each familiar. I'd say it's pretty unlikely that you get a familiar that's worth less than 2 mil that comes out of the pack, so my intuition says it's very worth doing. Instead of opening familiars randomly and gambling for profit, you can just farm familiars yourself. To help you find out which familiars are good to farm, think about why people want familiars. It's usually to unlock badge sets. You can prepare for that by farming familiars that contribute to a good set. Those are the ones that you might find some success in. For example, Mineral Badge is not a difficult badge to get, with all his required familiars being easy to get familiars, and he has a very good badge effect, Ignore Defense. If we just randomly pick this guard robot as our example here and check his price history in the auction house, bam, look at that. You can make about 20 mil profit per guard robot familiar here. That's amazing. Of course, make sure to check other familiars as well. You'd be surprised at how many people are lazy to farm. This one is more or less the same idea as the one before, except it's to hunt area boss monsters for their familiars. The drop rate for boss familiars are much lower, and even with drop gear you might not even find any, but they sell for much higher than common familiars. They are again needed to complete the badge sets, and they're generally the familiars that people hate farming, so there's usually a much higher demand for these boss familiars. Not all area bosses drop familiars, so make sure you confirm that they do drop from the area bosses before you hunt them. This one is also pretty simple and something a lot of you might already do. Basically, people want boss accessories to gear their Legion or Link Skill characters. They generally want it because they can get some decent flames. So make sure to pick up boss accessories and check their flames. The big ones are Condensed Power Crystal and Aquatic Eye Accessory from Zakim, Decidus Earrings from Horntail, Golden Clover Belt and Pink Bean Holy Cup from Pink Bean. You can also fuse identical equips if you're an alchemist or smith, which gives you an opportunity to reflame the equips. If you take the extra step and sell these just before a terror burning event, you can make a lot more profit, purely from the supply and demand argument I talked about in the market theory section of this video. If you don't understand, it's because a lot of people tend to create new characters during terror burning events, creating a high demand for boss accessories and therefore causing the price to rise, which is why it's the best time to sell. This one takes the previous point to the next level. You need level 100 insight for this trick, which will allow you to reveal items under level 120 for free. You can use this to cold queue boss accessories to epic. Most of them are level 120 or below, and you can sell these to make the easiest profit margins. Again, it will be best if you sold this just as a terror burning gets announced to maximize your gains. This one is pretty simple but requires you to understand the transfer hammer system. Basically, the transfer hammer system allows you to transfer the potential and stars, -1 star, to the same type of equip up to 10 levels higher, but retains the flames and scrolling on the higher level equip. If this confuses you, there's a lot of online resources about transfer hammer, or watch episode 21 of my free to play series where I go through it more in depth. But yeah, the biggest benefit of this system is that you can get an epic potential on your AppSub, CRA and Golos equips for free by picking up or buying epic potential penciliers from the auction house and transfer hammering. The other big benefit is that you can completely avoid booming expensive equips. Penciliers are much cheaper to replace than your endgame equips. I see an opportunity to create a market here. For example, selling 17 star equips using this system. There is definitely some risk here because again, this is profit through gambling, but you can use a Starforce simulator and base the average cost off expected values. I clumped all the coin shops together because they're all more or less the same. To find which equip is the most worth it to sell, you can check up the market prices in the auction house and calculate how much each coin is worth in Mesos. So for Commercy, Golux, Phantom Forest and Critias, this is very easy. All you do is look up the price and divide that by the number of coins required to make those items. I'm going to use Superior Golix Ring and Reinforced Golix Ring as our example here. You can apply the same logic to any other coin shop. So from the Golix shop, Superior Golix Rings cost 700 Golix coins, and Reinforced Golix Ring costs 450 Golix coins. Cross-checking with the auction house, Superior Golix Rings go for about 780 mil, and Reinforced Golix Rings go for 600 mil in bearer. We can calculate the value of each Golix coin by dividing the Mesos cost by the Golix coins, so we're sort of treating each item as a way of selling coins basically. Through selling Superior Golix Rings, each Golix coin is worth 1.11 mil, whereas through Reinforced Golix Rings, each Golix coin is worth 1.33 mil. Therefore, to maximize our Meso return, we would sell Reinforced Golix Rings in the auction house, because the Golix Ring is worth more through that. Of course, it is important to cross-check every other item in the Golix shop with the auction house to really maximize your profit, and the same logic applies to Commercy, Phantom Forest, and Critis shops. For Scrapyard, Dark World Tree, Arcana, and Esfera coin shops, the valuation is slightly different. For these shops, you need to obtain coins from the bosses like normal, and you also need to exchange tradable coins from weeklies or from farming. You could have sold these tradable coins to other players in the auction house, so to account for that, we need to isolate that cost first, then calculate the true value of the coins from bosses. I'll provide an example to show what I mean in the Lotus shop with Absolute Thief gloves. Absolute Thief gloves cost 2 Absolute coins. Each Absolute coin requires 1 Lotus coin and 20 diffusion cores, and diffusion cores are currently 4.5 mil each in bearer. So that means Absolute Thief gloves requires 40 diffusion cores or 180 mil. In the auction house they sell for 300 mil, so you can make 120 mil profit from that. To compare the calculation for the other items, you again divide the profit by the number of Lotus coins required to make them, which will calculate how much each Lotus coin is worth through selling this item. In this case, this is 60 mil per Lotus coin. I mentioned that you could have sold those tradable coins, right? That brings me to the next way of making Mesos. Do your weeklies to get more tradable coins, diffusion cores and faint stigmas. You can do this on as many characters as you want every week, as long as they're over level 190, and you can get 12 a week per character. Especially in the case of diffusion cores in bearer, they sell very well for 4.5 mil each. Faint stigmas are only 2 mil each, so it's not that great. Again, generally 5, 10, 15 event is the best time to sell Absolute equips and these coins. So one strategy I'd use is to buy heaps of diffusion cores when there aren't any events going on right now, because that's when it's cheapest. Then when 5, 10, 15 event is coming up, make Absolute equips to sell, which will give you the most profit. Specifically with Phantom Forest, another viable way of making Mesos is hunting for elite bosses there. The elite bosses there are special in that they give boxes that give Blackgate equips, and I heard that you can get unique equips pretty easily from this. In bearer, Blackgate equips don't sell particularly well, but I heard in other servers, Blackgate rings sell for as high as 200 mil, so that might be a pretty viable way to make Mesos. I hunted for an hour here to try and get my own clip of the elite boss, but I couldn't find a single one, so I gave up on that. This one is pretty simple. You basically want to get VIP equips from Alien PQ, which you can solo and enter 5 times a day. There are 5 stages. Stages 3 and 5 are the boss stages that actually drop VIP equips. VIP pendants and earrings are wanted for drop key, and the fact that they're quite high level means you can Star Force them if you really need some more damage. VIP shields are actually wanted by some players because they're completely tradable, which means there is resale value. Best in slot shields are generally untradeable after players equip them, which has no resale value, so these are pretty nice alternatives, especially if you wanted to trade them. I wouldn't farm with current prices in bearer, but I remember that the shields peaked at 200 mil a few months ago, so that would have been a good time to farm. This one won't be for you until you push for unique on your gear first and have leftover cubes. Definitely focus on using all the boss cubes that you get on yourself, but once you hit unique on all your equips and you're pushing for legendary, you might be thinking of how to use all the master craftsman cubes that you get from daily bosses. I think most people just throw on some random equips in their inventory without actually looking to research the market, which is a shame. They're not maximizing the potential gains. I recommend looking at the market and seeing what people actually want, instead of just brainlessly tiering anything you have. Some equips to consider are unique accessories, absabs, CRAs, and arcanes. Let's compare the returns of tiering the Sweetwater tattoos and Absab Thief shoulders to unique. Normal Sweetwater tattoos are 140 mil each, and unique Sweetwater tattoos are 350 mil each, so there's a 210 mil profit for tiering it to unique. On the other hand, normal Absab Thief shoulders are 120 mil each, and unique Absab Thief shoulders are 700 mil. There's a 580 mil profit for tiering it to unique. However, the reason why there is a much lower profit for Sweetwater tattoos is likely because a lot of people toss cubes on them, and they're a lot easier to sell than Absab Thief shoulders. I still think it's so much more profit tiering Absab Thief shoulders in this case. That's more than double the profit here. This one's a bit more difficult. It requires you to know which monsters drop certain items, and I don't know of any reliable websites anymore with all the monster drop changes. I still generally use Global Hidden Street, but I'm aware that it hasn't been updated in a long time. Some examples of items I might suggest hunting are Eelbees, Eternal Bullets, Wabies, Infinite Throwing Knife, Giant Bullet, EXP Accumulation, and Wealth Acquisition Recipes, and finally Scroll for Shield for attack and magic attack. Alright, nearing the end of this video, we have Mesos, arcane droplets, and Nodestone farming. I wouldn't recommend this unless you're pretty strong and you have some Meso gear and drop gear. You should be over level 225, be able to one-shot Arcana monsters at the minimum, have access to Frenzy, and have the one line of drop and Meso gear setup, which is 100% Meso obtained and 80% item drop. Depending on class, farming rates will differ a lot. The best I've seen are mechanics and zeros farming up to 650 mil per hour. That's regular server rates, by the way. It's insane, almost reboot rates here. If your class is not very good at farming, for example, a dual blade, bishop, hero, etc., I would consider job changing to a better farming class. So for example, dual blades to Night Lords, bishops to Ice Lightning Mages, heroes to Paladins. If you're unfortunately not an explorer class but looking for the best possible rates, then consider making a second main. Zeros and mechanics would be my suggestion, and farm on that. I don't even feel like I need to make a section on this. If you've already reached this point, you'll know, probably a lot better than me, how profitable this is. Regardless, I'll just touch on this for the newer players who are wondering what lies beyond the rainbow of progression. This is basically the light at the end of the tunnel, the reward for slaving through progression and funding. Generally, you need at least 40k of your main stat in order to join hard boss parties and contribute. If you're in a guild, you can find parties through mutuals. If your guild is dead and you don't really care about social aspects in this game like me, then looking out for smega of people recruiting for hard boss parties is a go-to. The amount of Mesos you get really depends on what equips drop. You could make 5 bill in one week, 1 bill in another, or even nothing in another if you're really unlucky. But regardless, this is what motivates people to push on and progress, to reach this state of nirvana. Alright, that's the end of this super comprehensive video on Mesos. I hope you all had fun. This definitely required the most work out of any video I made, especially because I literally recorded this twice, so I hope it was that much better to you guys. I think I showed everything I know about Mesos in this video, and at least with this out of the way, whenever someone new to the channel asks me how to make Mesos, I can refer this video to them. It also felt great fully focusing on the pure quantitative aspects of calculating profit. I've been trying to include these in some of my episodes, but I felt that it was too hard to focus on both my episode and the calculations. Anyways, thank you all for supporting me in this channel and allowing me to reach 1k sub. Each and every one of you were the reason why I was able to create this special video. I hope you all continue to buckle your seatbelts and join me in the rest of my journey in my free-to-play series. Oh wait, damn! I forgot to mention the very best way of making Mesos. I recorded everything already. I will just end this video with this very last secret way of making Mesos.
Oh, just go buy a frenzy, just go buy a frenzy. All you have to do is spend $2,000. So just go buy a frenzy, it's really that easy.
Thank you all for watching. I hope to see you guys soon. Thanks.